Hi, I'm Susan Gallagher. I'm a registered nurse, and I want to tell you about a pilot study that was done titled An Innovative Approach to Mobility in the Intensive Care Unit. The problem with mobility in the intensive care unit is many times the patients are so sick and complex that it's very difficult for nurses to be able to adequately mobilize the patient. I learned about a hospital in Lubbock, Texas, Covenant Medical Center, that had been using early progressive mobility strategies for a very long period of time. And so I wanted to learn more about what was being done at that facility. So the study was broken into two parts. The first was the quantitative, and that was really a survey where 25 of the registered nurses who worked in the intensive care unit completed a 10-item survey. In that survey, we learned a lot of different things. Some things we learned were that 94% of respondents felt like the intensive care unit was physically challenging. From a patient safety perspective, 75% of them felt like there was a relationship between safe patient handling and mobility and fall-related injury, and 90% indicated that there was a relationship between safe patient handling and mobility and reduction of pressure injury. The study became very interesting when we did the qualitative piece, or the interviews, how nurses felt about mobilizing the patients and why they did what they did. And what I found was that there was truly a culture of mobility. And I tried to spin down in terms of when did that culture develop and how did it develop, because I really wanted to know how we could use that information with other healthcare facilities. And what I learned was there had been this culture of mobility for decades. What the nurses did was they had a culture wherein they felt that they needed to get patients up and out of bed 2 or 3 times a day while in the intensive care unit. And I observed this. I made rounds. 60% of the patients were up in chairs when I made rounds. They were in the convertible mobility chairs, what I make reference to. I could see a chair down the hall, easily accessible. And we always say if the product isn't within 30 feet, we don't use it because it's too difficult to move away from our patients to access technology. So I learned a lot from this study. A couple things I learned was there has to be access to equipment. The nice thing about the low-tech, low-cost equipment is that hospitals then have funds to purchase large volumes of technology, so nurses have access to that. The second thing has to do with workflow disruption. When we bring in products that nurses are not familiar with the use of a particular product, it's just not used. And so by using a product where the product had evolved over time, but the practice stayed the same, I think that was key in this particular group of intensive care units. So what problem does this solve? It solves the problem where many times we put together policies and procedures for early progressive mobility. We buy a suite of progressive mobility tools for the intensive care unit, and they're simply not used because there isn't access or knowledge or confidence or competence. And there also is a disruption in the workflow pattern. The beauty of the convertible mobility chair is that it can be incorporated into a facility that has no safe patient handling program at all, but wants to begin with early progressive mobility. Or it can be integrated into a program that's very complex in terms of their safe patient handling and mobility, but want to develop an early progressive mobility program.